Thank you to these sponsors of the Before I Die New Mexico Virtual Festival in 2020. A Good Goodbye, Gail Rubin puts the fun in funeral planning. After, a new way to stay connected with your loved ones in the cemetery anytime and anywhere. Aquamationinfo.com, where you can learn about alkaline hydrolysis, an eco-friendly alternative to flame cremation. Compassion and Choices, offering care and choice at the end of life. Daniel's Family Funerals and Cremations and Gabaldon Mortuary in Albuquerque. Fairview Memorial Park and Vista Verde Memorial Park in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. Avista Cremation and Burial in Santa Fe. DeVargas Funeral Home and Crematory in Espanola and in Taos. Estate Pros, which offers personal dispersal of possessions due to a move, illness, or death. French Funerals and Cremations and Sunset Memorial Park in Albuquerque. And Keeper, which helps you keep memories alive with online tributes to preserve, celebrate, and share life legacies.
Death is full of surprises, huh?
You have no idea.
Yes, I am Gail Rubin, the doyen of death and the coordinator of the Before I Die New Mexico Festival. So happy to have you here for tonight's session with Karen Hyatt, the founder of Estate Pros New Mexico. And she is going to help us to get a handle on our possessions. And the title of this talk is Property Reincarnation, Giving New Life to the Stuff of Our Lives. And Lord knows we could all use a little help and insight about downsizing. So with that, do want to just remind you, if you have questions for Karen as we go along, type them into the chat and we will do the Q&A with her after she's done her presentation. So with that, please welcome Karen Hyatt.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Gail, for inviting me to participate in your festival. Gail, for those of you who have not met her, is such a visionary and the producer of this festival. Now, I think 4 years running and maybe more, 4, yes. And I thank each of you for sharing your Sunday evening with us. I hope you have your mug of hot tea with you, maybe a pencil and paper to go old school so that you can make some notes for yourself. And again, during the presentation, if you'll just type in any questions you may have in the chat, the presentation will only be about 45 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time to get to all of your questions at the end. So Chris, if you're ready to bring up our PowerPoint, we will start. Gail, it's a very nice picture.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Again, I'm Karen Hyatt, the founder of Estate Pros, and we can move ahead. We're going to give you some ideas tonight about what to do with all of those belongings, some precious, some forgotten, some valuable, and there's are many things you can do with them today or maybe tomorrow to start to prepare for the future. Tonight, I'd like you to think about all of these different areas. We may touch on most of them. Some of them we will not, but we will be tonight talking primarily about personal property distribution, and we will be specifically talking about some of the general things that all of us have in our homes, our barns, our basements, our attics, our sheds, our storage units. Yes, many of us have multiple storage units. So we can go to the next slide, Chris. And unfortunately, many of us look just like these two images. And the feeling we have is overwhelm. It's just amazing how much stuff we collect in our lives. And I'm not innocent in this. I have more books than any one person needs, but I refuse to get rid of any of them unless I've got multiples. So tonight we can share some good ideas about how to handle all of this overwhelming stuff in our lives. As you can see, you're not alone. Many homes look like this. Believe it or not, this was one corner of a garage in Santa Fe that we were called in to distribute all of the things in this home when the person died and left a garage that looked like this in only one corner. The next slide is another image of another garage where, as we unearthed these items one by one, we often consider our work somewhat like an archaeological dig. When we got to the back, those white walls back there were actually sliding doors that revealed cabinets and shelving that were filled with sentimental valuables for the family. And the next slide, Chris. This actually is the working, functioning office by a professor who was published, and this was in his home, and he worked in this space every day. Across the hall from him was another office that looked just like this, that his wife worked in every day. She too was a tenured professor and published. They did not die. That was not the reason that we were called into the home. They just eventually needed assisted living. So we were asked to distribute everything in their homes, in their home, and of course needed to move them to an assisted living for their safekeeping. Many of us these days, especially as boomers age, choose to age in place. And I think most of you understand what that term means. It just means that you would prefer to stay in your home rather than move to assisted living or a nursing facility, or maybe just a senior living center. Some of them are so beautiful and luxurious, but you love your home and you want to stay in it. So the first thing on our minds when we hear that is, on the next slide, you'll see that always our concerns are safety first. And I'd like, as I read through these different things to think about, I'd like you to just think about your living space right now. Especially if you're aging, or if you're between, say, 35 and 60, and you have aging parents who may be 60 to 108, maybe. You might want to think about their homes. Always, we want to clear our floors of any hazards. That may mean last week's newspapers beside your bed. It may be stacks of books beside your bed. It may be just when you walk in the back door from the garage, you always kind of drop your jacket and your umbrella by the door that you could trip over. We suggest very much that if you're going to stay in your home, that you live in a space with no steps. Especially second stories become very, very difficult to navigate. But it's really those 1 inch or 2 inch or 3 inch steps in a home, just varying levels, that can cause us to trip. And then we have a broken hip. And then it's really challenging after that as we age. We always want to get rugs up off the floor. And we may need to make modifications in your home, grab bars in the shower, grab bars near the toilet, maybe an additional bar going up the stairs if you do have stairs. So really think about your home and creating a safe space to continue to age in place. Thank you, Chris. And here's just an example. Even my own mother, who just turned 90 last month, has floor rugs in her home. And almost every week when I visit her, and yes, we've chosen for me to continue visiting her even during the pandemic, I say, Mom, don't we want to take up these floor rugs? Oh, yes, honey. Yes, I do. And then the next week they're down again, or she's even ordered new floor rugs. But you can just see with this floor rug on a hardwood floor, how easy it would be to trip on that, even though that may be one of your beloved textiles. So please consider rolling them up, having them dry cleaned, and maybe giving them to your children. This is an example of aging in place. This was a client in Albuquerque that we helped clear her space and make it safe many years ago. She needed hip replacement. And as you can see in her bedroom, the bedroom tidiness just deteriorated over time because she was losing mobility in her living space. So this is how her bedroom looked the day I first went in. The next slide shows us what her bedroom looks like with her kitty on the bed after we'd been there. The next slide for this woman shows her living room. And this was literally her living room the day I first went in to assess the job. And I need to mention that I never met this woman. She did have hip replacement and she was in rehab when we were hired to make her home more safe when she returned. But she had these different working surfaces, all of these books. And what you cannot see is that from the front door to the kitchen and from the front door down the hall to the bedrooms, it was like a goat path. You could barely walk down in through the house. But the next slide shows her living room after we had made sense of it. So we were actually able, by her conservator and her guardian, we were allowed to buy new carpets so that there were no floor rugs. And you see that lift chair, which was very comfortable. We were allowed to buy 2 lift chairs for her, one for the living room and one for the bedroom. We made sure that we kept all of her books in the order she had them by author and topic so that she could find them easily when she returned. She was a happy camper when she got back to her home. Now, on personal property, we're just going to talk about several kinds of items. So, Chris, let's go ahead. I think the next slide is about jewelry. There's several things I want to say about jewelry or suggest maybe you consider doing. First of all, as easy as it is these days to take photos of anything with our smartphones or maybe your iPad if you have one, start to take pictures of your watches, necklaces, men's watches, earrings, diamonds, turquoise, whatever kind of jewelry you have, and go ahead and print them out. And on the backs of those images, please describe it as best you can. This doesn't have to be a huge effort. It could just say turquoise and silver bead necklace. And if you can remember when you purchased it, that might be helpful to value it later if you're no longer around. And also, if you want a certain friend or family member to receive that piece of jewelry, please write on the back of that printout of that necklace, ring, earrings, necklace, watches, who you would like to receive that, and be as specific as possible. Chris has heard me use this example many times on a home that we were asked to distribute all the personal property several years ago. The gentleman had died. He left a huge art collection, a lot of jewelry, and on his distribution list, and he did not have any pictures, but on his distribution list, he had written, "Please give my favorite Rolex watch to my favorite nephew." Now, he had 4 Rolex watches, and of course, we did not have a clue which one was his favorite, and we had not a clue which was his favorite nephew. But after making some calls to family members, cousins, children, we were able to narrow that down. But as you can see, it can be very complicated, and your wishes after you die could be lost just because you have not been specific enough. Another thing that often happens, and really, I don't know that there's much way around this. Some people, let's say between 45 and 75, are really good record keepers. You keep files on your jewelry when you purchased it. You keep files on your art, textiles, sculpture. And then what happens as we age, sometimes you sell a piece of jewelry or art, or you gift it to someone else, and yet it still may be on your list with your will and all of your other legal papers. That can cause some hiccups after we die, but it's actually better to have more paperwork that is superfluous as opposed to not having enough. So Chris, if you could go on to the next slide. Yeah, currency. Um, most of us save cash, coins of some kind. A lot of it no longer has any increased value. It may just have face value after we die. And certainly when we're handling it, we cash that in and deposit it with the trust or the family member who's the personal representative or the executor. But it's really helpful to have your currency at least in one or two places so that we're not necessarily finding it, or your family members are not finding it in kitchen cabinets, bedroom drawers, maybe in a closet. It's just helpful to have all that together. And silver. I'm sure most of you know by now that the next generation is not too interested in all the silver that boomers and those who are older than boomers have been collecting and using all these years. Often what happens after someone dies is your silver that you may have really loved, even silver that may have been in the family for 3 or 4 generations. Ultimately, it may just get melted down for today's market value of the silver. This was a picture just in one home after a woman died. And ultimately, we were able to sell it, but it is very, very difficult to sell silver these days as a spoon or as a whole set of flatware. People younger than we are simply are not interested in entertaining that way anymore. So you might want to either go ahead and try to sell it before you get older, or see if there is someone in your family who might want it, rather than leaving it for after you're gone. Memorabilia. These are actual pictures. As you can see, some of them are quite old that we have found in the estates where we've worked. Some of these pictures are absolutely gorgeous black and white photos from even the 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. This is what I'm going to encourage you to do. Usually in any family, there tends to be a historian. So try to get all of your family photos labeled on the back, who was in the photo, if you know it, the year it was taken, and slip it into an archival sleeve so that it's somewhat protected. If you want to go ahead and send it to a cousin who might be the family historian, that would be great. But if you want to keep it so that you can enjoy it as long as you can, that's fine. This is what I'm going to warn you against. Do not, please, pack up your family history in these photos in single-sided boxes and place them directly either on concrete, which will leach, of course, and eventually kind of get everything in the box wet or at least damp. Or in one really sad situation where we worked, the home was built on the side of a mountain and the home was 2 stories. It had a full basement underneath it that was not finished. So when you walked through the door into the unfinished basement, it was literally the dirt on the mountain that we were walking on. But this couple had packed almost all of their family memorabilia, paperwork, books, photographs into single-sided boxes, and they were sitting directly on the dirt. Again, they had become moist through the years and everything was ruined. So this is my suggestion, and in a little bit, we're going to talk about packing again. But right now, I want to suggest this. Please, if you're packing family memorabilia in a box, please use a double-walled box. You can get them at Home Depot, Lowe's, any big box store. And I also suggest only using small boxes, meaning a book-sized box. Don't go to mediums, they become unwieldy. But in this box, place a black trash bag, plastic trash bag, and line it. Then start to very carefully place your memorabilia inside the plastic. When the box is full, fold the plastic over and tape it so that it's sealed, then seal the box. That will at least keep your things protected from moisture. And then if you're going to place them in a storage unit or in a basement, please put them up on wooden racks so that they're not sitting on concrete, because that will just be one other layer of protection with that air pocket beneath the boxes. So please don't pack your family memorabilia mindlessly and then it's ruined for the next generation. It's just a few extra steps to keep it safe. Thanks, Chris. And these are just some of the what we've come to call treasure boxes that we find in almost every home. And more often than not, these are treasure boxes of items that have been collected by men. You see that there are some war medallions in this treasure box. A lot of times we find handwritten notes. We find high school class rings. We find Boy Scout patches. We find Girl Scout patches, Campfire Girl beads. We find pocket knives, especially in a treasure box that was collected by men. A lot of times these pocket knives were given to them by their fathers when they were 8 years old, 10 years old. These boxes are dear. And actually, I didn't realize before I started this company 10 years ago, how many people do this. And so what I've started doing for friends for their birthdays, I often will give them a small handmade wooden box that they can begin to collect their treasures in for their children, their grandchildren. It's a beautiful thing to be able to, as a child, a son, a daughter, a cousin, receive such a box from a loved one. Books. Now, I don't know if you all are like I am, but if I need a 12-step program, I need it for books. We have found so many books in so many homes. If at all possible, if you can begin to purge your library now, maybe 2 hours a month, maybe you'll just take a few shelves and say, okay, I really don't need that anymore. I'm not going to use that. I'm not going to reference it. Or if it's fiction, I don't plan on reading that again. Maybe give it to a homeless shelter, give it to the library in your community. If they are of a certain nature, give it to the museum. If there are certain kinds of art books or art history books, go ahead and start to gift your library now. As you all know, most likely, it's very unlikely that after you're gone, or even now while you're still living, it's very unlikely that you'll actually be able to sell the books. We're quickly moving into the digital age and away from the book age, which is sad to me. The next slide also shows an example of a book. People often say to me, oh, but we have a lot of first editions. Those should be valuable. It depends. Um, if it's a signed first edition by a living author, the reality is it probably doesn't have any market value at this point. But people also will often say to me, but these are really old antique books. Won't these be worth something? Well, this particular Bible that was said to me by this family, they did have their family history in it. As you know, in the middle of these beautiful large Bibles, often it has genealogy going back several generations. But this particular old Bible would have no market value because the image to the right, you see it was in such bad condition. You can even see that it's in poor condition on the image, in the image on the left. And these days, for old books to have any value in the marketplace, they need to be the 19th century books. That means, yes, the 1800s, and they need to be in immaculate condition before they're really going to have any value in the marketplace. The next slide, I think also, oh, I was wrong. So anyway, books, which again, I am guilty on this. It's okay, Chris. I thought there was an extra slide in there. If you can start to gift those to family members, friends, or local nonprofits, do that now. Now, furniture, I know there may be some people joining us this evening from other areas in the country, so this may not apply to you, but especially if you live in the Southwest, I just want to point out that these styles of furniture that are more like folk art and they are obviously regional, these will have more value on the resale market, either in an estate sale, a garage sale, or in a consignment store than some really valuable antiques that I'm going to show you in a little bit. So this style of furniture, again, is going to have a higher resale value in the marketplace. Again, this is a regional image, but as those of you who live in the Southwest are very familiar with Nambe ware, sadly, there is so much Nambe ware in the marketplace these days that the resale value is not great. Especially if your piece has been used a lot. Like I have a few pieces of Nambe, and for years I've made lasagna in one of my casserole dishes, and you can tell it when you look at it. And so if I were trying to sell that casserole dish right now, first of all, no consignment store would take it because it's so scarred from all the serving that we've done out of the dish. But you can actually have these Nambe pieces refurbished, but usually the cost to do that is greater than what you might get for it in the marketplace. Now I want to bring your attention to the image on the left. This picture, we really can't show how beautiful this was. This is a vase that was almost 2.5 feet tall. It really is a statement piece. And we were able to sell that out of an estate directly to a collector of Nambe. And the trust was very pleased about that. We could have also sold it on consignment, but I happen to know someone who collected Nambe ware. So statement pieces of Nambe, as well as silver, have a much better chance of selling on the resale market. Again, these are regional pictures of figurines. Actually, that figure in the top left, is actually was quite valuable, and we were able to sell that. The pottery is in good shape. We were able to sell that on the resale market. And it kind of depends about pottery in the Southwest, who the artist was, which pueblo it's from, and the decade it was crafted in. Especially older pieces, the 1940s and older, if they're in pretty decent shape, those have a much better chance of resale value on the open market. This is something I want to point out that's very, very helpful. And these are two pictures of the back of a framed piece of art. Whenever you might want to sell a piece of two-dimensional art, especially, let's say at an auction house or even at a gallery, most of them these days ask that you submit photographs of the front and the back. And the more detail on the back of an art piece, the better, because this is part of the authentication process, especially for an art auction house. So in this case, this was a lithograph that actually has the certificate of the numbered piece on the back in this sleeve, and it came from the gallery that way. Another thing that often happens, especially on canvases, an artist not only may sign it with acrylic or oil on the front of the piece, but they may have taken a charcoal or a pen of some kind and signed it across the back. And they may have also put the year and the name of the piece on the back. Those pictures are really crucial if you're submitting your art to an auction house. A lot of art on the back has cobwebs, so you have to clean it first before you do that. These are two good examples of a valuable and a not valuable. I don't even know if that's good sentence structure, but anyway, this cross and cockade journal, we found dozens of these in the home of a man that had collected them for years. And his two adult daughters, both of them in their 60s, were convinced that these journals had a lot of market value. My hunch was they didn't. And I always hate to take time to charge a client hourly rate to possibly go down a rabbit hole investigating this kind of thing. So I strongly suggested that the daughters do some research online. And what they found, of course, is that that journal had no market value, even though their father had collected them studiously and chronicled them for years. So the paper and the magazines just had to be recycled as paper. Now, the image on the right, although it's a little bit difficult to see, in an estate where we were clearing the home of all the personal possessions, and in fact, it was a very modest home. This woman died at the age of 102 and had been since, I can't remember, the 40s maybe, a professor at universities. And so her library was amazing. But in one of her back bedroom closets, we found a cache of about 24 rolled up, hand-drawn, hand-tinted maps. And most of these maps were of Britain, Scotland, Ireland in the 1800s. A few of them were the 1700s. So, of course, I quickly called an appraiser who specialized in maps, and we got an appraisal on these maps. And thank goodness no one, certainly we wouldn't have tossed them out, but they ended up being valued between $20,000 and $30,000. And for this particular family, that added greatly to what was being distributed to the family. So you always want to be careful about things you might find in closets. Okay, Chris. These pieces of antiques are the ones I wanted to point out in contrast to the more regional furniture that I showed you several slides ago. These were actually beautiful pieces of antique furniture that had come, actually one of them had come from Europe, but they were both from New England, although we found these in Santa Fe, and they were filled with beautiful silver, crystal, and china that was collected and handed down for about 3 generations in the family. The point I want to make on these pieces of antiques, in this market, we were able to sell them, but not for as much if these pieces of furniture had been sitting in Dallas, maybe even Denver, certainly Atlanta or New England. But at that point, to run a cost benefit ratio on shipping these items to New England, it just didn't make any sense. It would have cost too much money to get them there intact. And so the family chose to sell them in this market, but you just can't expect to get as much for these beautiful antiques in this market as you would something that's more regional. Um, in a lot of estates, this happened to be a farm, a small farm south of Albuquerque. And this tractor was a 1955 John Deere tractor, which was in beautiful shape. And it's actually sitting next to a concrete block building that was just a rectangular. It was 2,000 square feet, and it was the man cave of the man who had died. Now, in a minute, I'm going to show you some pictures of what we found inside the man cave. But this man's wife, at our suggestion, we decided to have an on-site auction. And this John Deere tractor was the magnet that pulled people from Texas, Arizona, of course, New Mexico. And we even knew of 2 people who drove down from Colorado just to bid on that tractor. So every once in a while, a home, a ranch, a farm, you'll have one anchor piece that can really make the difference in getting the traffic to your estate sale or your garage sale. Clocks. We find these beautiful, beautiful clocks in almost every home. You may own one. And if you're going to gift a clock now or after you're gone to a family member who may live across the country or around the world, we're very fortunate in Santa Fe to have an internationally famous, I call him a clock master. I'm sure he has a different name, a real professional name, Andrew Barron. And we hire him to come in, and he removes the moving parts of clocks if we're going to ship them, and packs them so that they arrive they arrive safely. And then, of course, wherever they're going, whether that's Arkansas, Minnesota, Florida, they have to be put back together by someone who knows what they're doing. And some clocks have a lot of value, so don't dismiss the clock that's maybe been in your family for years. Thanks, Chris. Here we go. Many artists who some are very, very well organized in their studios, others not so organized. But this was the studio of an amazing artist in Santa Fe. And this was just one wall of her studio, as you can see, very organized. And all of these things, they weren't necessarily saleable. These compartments were filled with, oils, acrylics, pencils, charcoal, papers, but we were able to literally just lift these items off these shelves and transport them to some schools in Santa Fe and donate those to some of our private schools. This is one picture of the inside of that man cave I pointed out to you a few slides back that had the Deere tractor. This man probably legitimately was a hoarder. Um, and the criteria, actually, the American Psychological Association has a 5-point scale for hoarding. Probably most of us would be at 1 or 2, honestly, on the scale. 3, that's kind of the tipping point. This man probably on that scale would have been a 4. When you get to 5, you not only find a lot of repetition in the collection, like you might find a dozen computers that have never been taken out of their boxes. You might find the same kind of software never taken out of its box. You might find games, tools. It's the repetition of those things. But by the time someone would be categorized as a 5 on the hoarding scale in the APA, there would also be animals involved in the setting. Maybe 2 dozen cats, maybe rodents, a dozen dogs. It can really be overwhelming. There were no animals involved in this case. And just so that you know, and I would ask you to consider not using this language either. The only time I ever use the word hoarding is in a presentation like this. When I go into a home that maybe the person, maybe it appears they were a hoarder, I would never label someone a hoarder to the family or even a professional, maybe a banker, an attorney. Might be the one showing me through the home, because the word hoarding carries such shame with it for the family members. A lot of times I'll characterize it more like, oh, wasn't your father curious? Look at all the things he collected. And I can do that with an honest, straight face because it does indicate curiosity. It indicates other things also, but it's not my place to judge that person and the behaviors they had. And any way that any of us can go through life using language that is more neutral, uh, I think that's a wiser, kinder choice. So I don't ever use the word hoarder or hoarding when I go into a home. Next slide. Um, these days, digital and paper documents, we've really, again, and those of you who are younger than I and more techno savvy are certainly aware of this, but there are many ways these days that, and we can go to the next slide, Chris, that um, ways that we can track important paperwork of items in our homes. Now, I've used in this first slide 2 examples of the kinds of inventories that we might create for a client. And you say, well, why did you use 2 pages? Well, there's a difference in these. The inventory on the left, you see in the left column, it has an inventory number. The next column has a picture of the item. The next column is a description. And in this particular job, we were not asked to assign any values to these things. You see that last column says decision. And we were communicating with our client in California. We were literally going through 4 generations of items on a 10,000 acre ranch in New Mexico. And as we would take pictures of items, we would text them to her in California. She would respond and tell us what to do with those items. So that was her decision column that we created. Now, the inventory to the right, actually, you'll see it's the same layout, except on the right-hand column, it actually has a current market value, which that client had asked us to assign to each item as we were finding them in the home and creating inventories. Now, you could do this same kind of inventory if you wish, and if you enjoy that kind of thing. this would give you a good template to do of your art, your jewelry, maybe your books if you cared, maybe if you're a published author, you might want to create an inventory like this. The next slide, though, will suggest um, a way to value your items. Now, this particular form is actually the form that you would see if you were using a national moving company. And if you've ever moved using one of those companies, you know that they always ask you to assign a value to high value items. So, the client in this case had just written with their penmanship the item and then assigned a value to it. Even if you, again, just take a notepad and start to do that kind of inventory of high value items in your home now, that could be very helpful. And then the next slide. There's all kinds of ways these days to share information with family members. Let's say you live here, but maybe your adult child lives in Los Angeles or New York or France, and you want to keep them abreast of where your important documents are, your insurance, your medical insurance, maybe your passwords into your computer. You could use any of these, Google Docs, Dropbox, even a thumb drive, just put it in, say once a month, once a quarter, anytime you change some of your documents, and keep that in a safe place for a family member or for your executor or a personal representative. Next slide, thanks. And always, always, always make duplicates, especially on your computers. This happened to me last week. All of a sudden, I couldn't access my computer. And fortunately, I had 2 different external hard drives that I'm pretty crazy about daily, backing up on both of those just to make sure I don't lose any information. And this last week, I was really glad I had those. Next slide. Here we go about some more packing and storage, as you know earlier, and we'll go to the next slide, Chris, to give you some examples. These are just some of the packing that we've done on site. I will say that this image in the middle, those are all double-walled boxes. The reason we used double-walled in this case is because these were boxes filled with books that were going to a research center in Santa Fe, and we knew they were going to be storing the books for a while in an off-site location. So again, the double-walled box protects the contents longer over time. The image on the right, let's say you decide to send a lot of family photos to your child in Seattle. I would suggest that you wrap each photo in bubble wrap, and then maybe you can see we've actually then placed a cardboard slat between every image here that has been wrapped in bubble wrap. It's just an additional protection as it's transporting across the country. So Chris, if you'll go on. This is just an example. We end up, of course, this would be understandable. In Santa Fe, we handle a lot of artist studios in Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And we were transporting these Buddha sculptures from a studio to long-term storage. So we were very careful. You can go to the next slide, Chris, that even though they were all in this van, we then wrapped them in moving blankets to get them to the studio, and you can show the next slide. And then we positioned them on this shelving in the storage unit. And then once we had the shelves filled, we covered them with plastic. Again, just suggesting these images so that you can imagine how you might want to store your sentimentally important or valuable items offsite. And again, we all just have an awful lot of stuff in our lives. This image was actually shared with me by one of our clients when they were traveling in Southeast Asia. She snapped this picture one day and I asked her if we could use it. It's just so perfect. Um, and that completes actually the presentation. I hope it's given you some ideas of how to handle your own items carefully, also processes to start to do that a little bit at a time. And now, Gail, if we have any questions in the chat, I'm very happy to respond to them.
Excellent, wonderful presentation. I had no clue some of the stuff that you shared about. So here is a comment from Althea saying, I had an external drive fail with thousands of family and vacation pictures, plus there were a lot of documents. I learned the hard way that these hard drives have about a 3-year shelf life. I paid a data recovery service a lot of money to get them back.
Oh,
Oh boy.
well, thanks for sharing that. And I'm sorry that that happened to you, but that can be a word of warning for all of us. So sorry, really sorry.
And yes, we have been recording this video. Holly asked, will this be available to watch later? I would like to watch it with my mom. Yeah, I wouldn't mind showing this to my parents as well. Yeah. Oh, and Althea did get them all back, so it's all good.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good,
yeah.
Althea.
You know, I'd like to comment on the silver that you showed. That was very ornate silver. And I remember, you know, I've inherited a few pieces that I thought were sterling, but really weren't my cup of tea. And it wasn't silver forks and knives. It was like the centerpiece that had like cones and leaves and stuff. And I took it to there was this group that comes through and buys up silver, and I took it in and they said, nope, it's silver plate. Nah, we're not going to give you anything for it. So I was like, great. And so I still have it, but I don't know what to do with it. Yeah.
I know.
Any
You know, Gail, let me suggest on a piece like that that sounds like it was really a statement piece and you still have it. If you're in a place that you might want to donate it, you could consider, and all of you could consider this, donating to your community theaters in your community as, you know, a prop. We end up donating more clothing to little theaters in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, since we're in New Mexico, wedding dresses, furs, period clothing, but also every once in a while we come across a suitcase from the 1920s or a briefcase from the 1940s. And if you think you can't sell it for a certain amount, to donating it to a little theater group is it gives it a second life.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea. Well, in fact, I've suggested that in my own book, Kicking the Bucket List, 100 sizing and organizing things to do before you die. And in fact, donating a little theater to theaters was one of the things, but I hadn't thought about it for my own thing. Courtney asked, how does your company price your services?
Thanks, Courtney. Yes, we price by the hour. So when I go in and do an on-site assessment, let's say, Courtney, if you had me come into your home or your parents' home, after we do a walkthrough of the home, I would fill out our form. I'd also take pictures if you gave me permission to. And then within 2 days, I send you a written proposal which outlines the steps or phases that we suggest of how to distribute all the personal property most efficiently and according to your instructions. And we provide a timeline and an estimated cost so that there's no surprise, especially if people are contacting us after someone has died. I'm very aware and careful about the fact that usually, of course, that family is already grieving. So we don't want to add more stress by not being very transparent and clear about how we're going to charge. And also, anything that we place for sale, we do not take a percentage of that. Also, if we hire subcontractors like movers or people to replace bricks on the patio or to replace windows or skylights, just whatever has to happen in the home to prepare it for the marketplace, we also don't take a percentage of that subcontractor's fee. So all of that is carefully outlined in our written proposal.
And Holly asks, what kind of training does someone need for this sort of work?
Oh, well, now I have never been asked that question before. I love that. Holly, I can tell you a couple of things. I'll go about it this way. 10 years ago, we'll have our 10-year anniversary this coming January. And before that, I had been a case manager for a woman. I would hire her caregivers and train them and schedule them and all of that. And I realized that when she died, she did die at 101 and 5 months. She was an amazing person. Um, that she had no family to come in and handle her possessions. So I offered to the trust officer at the bank that I'd be willing to do that. And so she was thrilled, and two of us started doing that. And I realized that there was a real need in communities for people to be able to handle professionally, thoughtfully, with love and kindness and compassion, the objects of our lives. So I started this company as a result of that. I'd say my background is I just kind of came out of the womb organized, somewhat tediously so. And so that kind of thing, it comes easily for me. But in our company, and I have 16 employees, we have a 40-hour training that people go through, and it covers everything from how to tape a box to pack stemware to how to be in the presence of someone who's actively grieving as you're packing up the home. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but that answers it from a very personal standpoint.
Toddy asks, what about just cleaning out a storeroom that's full of neat stuff, like a grand piano?
Uh,
How do you do that? This lady in her 90s, this lady is in her 90s and has now decided to do a death cleaning.
ooh,
Ooh.
well, I love that for anyone to start doing it. I try to do it myself, and I don't have any plans to die anytime soon. But what I would suggest first is, especially if you're older and may need someone to be your arms and legs in the process, to maybe even think about hiring some teenagers or college students that might live in your neighborhood or be going to a community college. Of course, these days that's all remote, most of it. But if someone could assist you with that, to carry out the boxes and set them on a patio table and let you go through things as you're clearing the space. And then you might need more than one very strong guy to remove a baby grand piano. I will comment on pianos. Unless it is a very rare, well-maintained, beautiful instrument, pianos and organs are other items that are very, very difficult to sell these days. They are also very difficult to donate because churches, uh, homeless shelters, teenage centers, they've all received all the pianos that they can handle. So it is just really challenging to find a next home for a piano or an organ. I don't mean to be negative, but I do want to be honest.
Well, and I have to put in a good word for you because I referred you to a friend of mine who has advanced COPD, and he wanted to get rid of some stuff in his home, but he physically couldn't handle it himself. And you were able to help him do some
Mhm.
downsizing and organizing that somebody else did on his behalf. And he was very happy with that.
Good, good.
Um, and Holly says, thank you for sharing. I helped organize my grandma's belongings when she moved into a facility. And again, when she passed, I really appreciate the gift this kind of work is.
Thank you. And Holly, and all of you, I'd like to share my personal / company email address so that if you want to be in touch after this, I'm happy to share any information that I have. And we have like a 25-page resource document that we've created over the last 10 years. Everyone is vetted on it. It's a living document. We're always adjusting it and editing it. But if you guys have pencil and paper or want to put this in your iPhone right now, you can reach me at Karen, that's spelled Karen, at estateprosnm for New Mexico.com. So again, it's Karen at estateprosnm.com.
Okay. And Holly said that would be awesome.
Okay, awesome, Holly. I look
Awesome.
forward to hearing from you.
And Althea added, I love this. Thank you. My husband has a few collections, like 30 years worth of various journals. I'm going to show him this recording. And that is about, people are asking, will this be available later? Yes,
Mm.
we are going to turn this into a video and put it on my YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see it at the Before I Die New Mexico website, beforeidinm.com. And so yes, you will be able to see this later. And any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with, Karen?
No, I would say, especially if you're talking to your parents, be kind and patient. I know that when you're the adult child, you're more in an efficiency mode, and your parents are more in a memory mode. And so I would encourage you to be very kind and patient with them as they start to purge and make decisions about their possessions. A dear friend of mine who worked for us for a while once said to me, our possessions hold our memories and carry our legacy forward. So whether it's a bowl on your desk that has seashells that you and your children collected every time you went to the beach, and they may have no monetary value, those hold years of memories for your aging mother, your aging father. I do encourage you to be very patient and kind with your parents.
Okay, I got two more questions.
Okay.
Okay, Susan asked, have you sold stamp collections?
Yes. And typically in any community, you can find the dealers of stamp collections. I will say that a lot of stamp collections are not as valuable as you hope they are, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't show it to a dealer to get their feedback on it. You do want to go to a reputable dealer. Really, I've never encountered one who's not reputable. They tend to just love what they do. And a lot of times, stamp dealers are associated with coin and silver and gem dealers. So even if you go into that kind of a storefront, they might know a stamp dealer that they work with all the time.
And Althea asked, do you go to other states? I'm not sure if that means if you work with clients in other
Oh,
states.
you know, we don't take a team to other states, but I end up consulting with a lot of people in other states, and I'm very happy to do that. You would be astounded at how many resources there are across the country, maybe who don't have our same business service or plan, but we can kind of piece that together so that you can get the support you need.
And Toddy, this is more a question for me, is asking, can anybody look at these videos? Yes, you don't have
Good.
to have a ticket. They will be available for anybody to see. We're just collecting them in a playlist on YouTube so that you can go to that page, the video page at the Before I Die nm.com website, and see them all there in one
Good.
place. Yay.
Thanks, Gail.
Well, thank you, Karen. This was an awesome presentation. What a long day we have all had, those of us who are attending all of the sessions. But oh my God, what a great, great day of learning and sharing of information. And tomorrow's going to be even better. Well, I mean, they're all great, but we have a representative from the Office of the Medical Investigator talking about what they do, and we'll have a book discussion. And Karen, you're going to join us on that for managing our loved ones' possessions before and after they die. We have two funeral directors who are great friends of mine, one in New York City and one in Houston, talking about being a funeral director at the peak of COVID deaths in those two cities. We'll talk more about advanced care planning, another death cafe discussion. You'll have a chance to learn about Fathers Building Futures, and another play from Robert Benjamin will cap off this festival. It's called Allocating the Jewels, and you don't want to miss that.